Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in Texas, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The leather strap cracked against small bones like thunder-splitting dry wood. Behind the Broken Wheel Saloon in Copper Ridge, a drunk man named Silas Drummond brought his belt down again and again on two children cowering in the dirt. The boy, maybe 12, threw his body over his little sister, taking blow after blow meant for her. Blood ran from his split lip into the dust, making dark mud beneath them. The girl, no more than 7, pressed her face into her brother's chest, her whole body shaking like a leaf in a storm. "Please, Pa!" the boy gasped between strikes. "We didn't mean to drop the water bucket. Please stop!" But Silas Drummond was past hearing, past caring, lost in the rage that whiskey always brought out of him. That's when Josiah Colt stepped out of the saloon's back door to empty his stomach after too much bourbon. The war veteran froze mid-step, watching the scene unfold. His hand moved to the Colt .45 on his hip, fingers wrapping around the worn handle. He'd seen plenty of violence in his 43 years, watched his own wife and daughter die of scarlet fever, buried brothers in battlefield mud, killed men who deserved it, and some who didn't. But watching a grown man beat children like dogs in an alley made something snap inside his chest. "That's enough," Josiah said, his voice cutting through the evening air like a blade. Silas whirled around, belt still raised, eyes bloodshot and wild. "Mind your own business, stranger. These are my young'uns, and I'll discipline them how I see fit." The boy looked up through swollen eyes, and Josiah saw something he recognized, the look of someone who'd given up hope. Josiah took 3 slow steps forward, his spurs ringing against the packed earth. "I said that's enough." Silas laughed, a ugly sound that made the little girl whimper. "What are you gonna do about it, old man? Shoot me? Go ahead. See how fast the sheriff strings you up for murder." Josiah's jaw tightened. The man was right. Killing him would only make things worse for the children. But then an idea struck him, wild and sudden as lightning. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather pouch heavy with gold coins. "How much?" he asked. Silas blinked, confused. "What?" Josiah tossed the pouch at Silas's feet, where it landed with a satisfying thud. "For the children. How much to buy them from you?" The alley went silent except for the distant piano music from inside the saloon. Silas stared at the pouch, then at Josiah, then back at the pouch. His lips curled into a greedy smile. "You want to buy my brats?" He kicked the boy in the ribs, making him grunt. "These worthless mouths to feed?" Josiah's hand twitched toward his gun, but he forced it still. $500. Gold. Right there in that pouch. It was every cent he had, saved from selling his cattle before the drought hit. Silas's eyes went wide. That was more money than he'd see in 3 years of drinking and gambling. He bent down, snatched up the pouch, and weighed it in his palm. "They're yours," he spat, already backing toward the saloon door. "But don't come crying to me when you realize what burdens they are." He disappeared inside without a backward glance at his children. Josiah knelt beside the boy and girl, moving slow like he was approaching spooked horses. The boy tensed, ready for more violence, but Josiah just held out his open hands. "My name's Josiah Colt. I've got a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Plenty of room, plenty of food, and nobody's ever going to hit you again. Not while I'm breathing." The boy's eyes searched his face, looking for the trick, the lie. "Why?" he whispered through cracked lips. "Why would you do this?" Josiah thought of his daughter Emma, how she'd been just about this girl's age when the fever took her. "Because everybody deserves a chance at something better," he said. What are your names?" The boy struggled to sit up, still shielding his sister. "I'm Samuel. This is Grace." The little girl peeked out, her green eyes huge in her dirt-streaked face. "Is it true?" she asked in a voice small as a bird's. "Nobody will hit us?" Josiah's throat tightened. "I promise you, little one, you're safe now, both of you." 3 weeks before that night behind the saloon, Josiah Colt had been a different man. He stood on the hill overlooking his ranch, watching the sun paint the grassland gold. The Double C Ranch spread for 300 acres of good grazing land, with a solid 2-story house he'd built with his own hands. But it was empty as a tomb. His wife Margaret had been gone 5 years now, Emma for 4. Their graves sat under the oak tree by the creek, marked with stones he'd carved himself. Some mornings he still set 3 plates at breakfast before remembering. The ranch hands had all left for better-paying work at the mines, and Josiah hadn't bothered hiring new ones. What was the point of building something when there was nobody to leave it to? He'd started spending more evenings in town, drinking enough whiskey to make the house feel less hollow when he returned. That particular day, he'd ridden into Copper Ridge to sell his last 20 head of cattle to Humphrey Tate, the banker who also dealt in livestock. The drought had burned through his savings, and he needed money for supplies to last the winter. Humphrey, a fat man who sweated even in December, counted out the gold coins with reluctance. $500 as agreed, he said, sliding the pouch across his desk. "Though I still say you're foolish to sell. Cattle prices will go up come spring." Josiah pocketed the money without counting it. "Won't matter if I starve before spring comes." He'd left the bank and headed straight for the Broken Wheel Saloon, planning to drink just enough to forget the sound of Emma's laughter, which still echoed through the empty rooms of his house. The saloon was thick with smoke and noise when he'd arrived. Cowboys from the Rocking Tea outfit were playing cards in the corner, and saloon girls in red dresses moved between tables like bright birds. Josiah had taken a seat at the bar, ordering bourbon and keeping to himself. That's when he'd first noticed Silas Drummond, stumbling through the front door with 2 children trailing behind him like shadows. The boy held the girl's hand tight, both of them trying to be invisible. "Wait outside," Silas had snarled at them. "And don't you dare move, or you'll get worse than last time." The children had slipped out the back door to wait in the alley. Josiah had watched them go, something twisting in his gut. He knew that look, had seen it on soldiers' faces before battle, on horses before a storm. It was the look of creatures who knew pain was coming and couldn't escape it. For 2 hours, Josiah had nursed his drinks and watched Silas gamble away money he clearly didn't have. The man was loud, mean, and getting meaner with every hand he lost. Other patrons gave him a wide berth. "Heard his wife ran off last month," the bartender, Murphy, had said quietly when Josiah asked about him. "Left him with those 2 kids. He's been on a tear ever since. Feel sorry for those young ones." Josiah had ordered another bourbon, trying to push down memories of Emma running to greet him when he came home from the fields. Those children in the alley had nobody running to save them. Nobody except maybe a broken-down rancher with gold in his pocket and too many ghosts in his heart. When the sound of a water bucket clattering on wood had echoed from the alley, followed by Silas's roar of rage, Josiah had known what was coming. He'd heard the first crack of the belt before he was even out of his chair. His body moved on instinct, pushing through the back door into the cooling evening air. And there it was, a scene that would haunt him if he walked away, or change everything if he didn't. The moment he saw that boy throwing himself over his sister, taking beatings meant for her, Josiah saw his own failure reflected back. He hadn't been able to save Emma from the fever, hadn't been there when she needed him most. But he was here now. These children needed someone to stand between them and the darkness. Maybe saving them could start to fill the hole in his chest that whiskey never could. The ride to the Double C Ranch had been silent except for the creak of saddle leather and the soft breathing of Grace, who'd fallen asleep against her brother's chest. Josiah had lifted them both onto his horse, a gentle mare named Buttercup, while he walked alongside holding the reins. Samuel kept his arms tight around Grace, his eyes never leaving Josiah's face, watching for any sign of danger. When they'd finally crested the last hill and the ranch house came into view, bathed in moonlight, Samuel had spoken for the first time since leaving town. "Is this real?" he'd asked, voice raw. "Or am I dreaming?" Josiah had looked up at the boy's battered face and felt his heart crack a little more. "It's real, son. Welcome home." But he could see Samuel didn't believe him. Trust was something that would have to be earned slowly, one day at a time. That first night, Josiah had run a hot bath in the copper tub, the first real bath the children had likely had in months. Grace had been scared of the water at first, crying that it would hurt her cuts. But Josiah had been patient, showing her how warm water could feel good, not painful. He'd given them clean clothes that had belonged to Emma, kept in a trunk he hadn't been able to throw away. The dress was too big for Grace, and Samuel had to roll up the trouser legs 3 times, but they were clean and soft. At dinner, they'd eaten like wolves, stuffing bread and stew into their mouths as if someone might snatch it away. "Slow down," Josiah had said gently. "There's plenty more. Nobody's going to take it from you." Grace had looked at him with those huge green eyes. "Promise," she'd whispered. "Promise," he'd said, and meant it. Over the next weeks, routines began to form like roots taking hold in good soil. Samuel would wake before dawn, creeping downstairs to check that Josiah was really there, really staying. He'd find the older man already making coffee, and they'd sit in comfortable silence watching the sun rise. Grace would come down later, still clutching the cloth doll Josiah had found in Emma's things. She'd taken to following him around the ranch, asking endless questions. "Why do horses need shoes? Where do birds go at night? Can clouds feel sad when they rain?" Josiah answered them all, remembering how Emma had been the same way. Slowly, carefully, Samuel started helping with chores, feeding chickens, mending fences, learning to curry the horses. His hands were steady and gentle, and the animals trusted him instinctively. But nightmares came like clockwork. Josiah would wake to Grace's screams or find Samuel sitting bolt upright, sweat pouring down his face, fists clenched, ready to fight. Those nights Josiah would make hot milk with honey and sit with them until the shaking stopped. He never asked what they dreamed about. He knew. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching stars appear, Grace had crawled into his lap without asking. The weight of her small body against his chest had made him close his eyes against sudden tears. "Mr. Josiah," she'd said, "are you our pa now?" Samuel had tensed, ready to grab her and run if the answer was wrong. Josiah had been quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "If you'll have me," he'd said finally, "I'd be honored to be whatever you need me to be." The breakthrough had come 3 weeks in, when Samuel had found Josiah at Margaret and Emma's graves. The older man had been kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds with tears running down his weathered face. Samuel had approached slowly, then knelt beside him, and started pulling weeds too. They'd worked in silence until the graves were clean. "My ma's dead too," Samuel had said quietly. "Fever took her last winter. That's when Pa started drinking bad." Josiah had nodded, understanding. "The fever took my wife and daughter. Emma was just about Grace's age." They'd sat there as the sun set, 2 broken souls recognizing each other's pain. That night at dinner, Samuel had called him Josiah instead of Mr. Colt for the first time. And when Grace had fallen asleep at the table, her head on her plate, Samuel had actually smiled as Josiah carried her up to bed. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The peace lasted exactly 43 days. Josiah had been teaching Samuel to shoot tin cans off a fence post when the riders appeared on the horizon. 3 men, moving fast, dust clouds rising behind them like smoke. Grace had been playing with the chickens, laughing as they pecked corn from her hands. The moment Samuel saw the riders, his whole body changed. The rifle in his hands started shaking. "Get Grace inside," Josiah said quietly, recognizing trouble in the way the men rode. Aggressive, purposeful. Samuel grabbed his sister and ran for the house, while Josiah walked to meet the riders at the gate. He recognized one immediately. Rex Drummond, Silas's younger brother, meaner and smarter than Silas ever was. The other 2 were hired guns, their hands resting casual on their pistols. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Josiah said, his own hand near his Colt. "Something I can help you with?" Rex spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "You've got something that belongs to my brother." "I bought those children fair and square," Josiah said, keeping his voice level. "Paid good money for them. They're under my protection now." Rex laughed, an ugly sound like breaking glass. "See, that's where you're wrong, old man. Silas was drunk, not in his right mind. Can't make a legal sale when you're drunk. He wants his property back." From the house window, Josiah could see Samuel watching, the boy's face pale as paper. "They're not property," Josiah said, iron creeping into his voice. "They're children, and they're staying here." Rex's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "We'll see about that. Silas says you can have your money back, minus a fee for the inconvenience. Say $300 returned. You hand over the brats and we all go our separate ways, peaceful-like." Josiah's hand moved to his gun handle. "Get off my land, now." The 2 hired guns shifted in their saddles, ready to draw. Rex held up a hand, stopping them. "No need for violence, yet. We'll give you 3 days to think it over. After that, well." He looked toward the house where Grace's small face had appeared beside Samuel's in the window. "Would be a shame if something happened to that nice house of yours. Fires start so easy in dry weather." They turned their horses and rode off, but Rex called back over his shoulder. 3 days, Colt. Don't be stupid." As the dust settled, Josiah stood there feeling the weight of what was coming. He'd been in enough fights to know when one was brewing, but this time he had more to lose than just his own life. That night, he sat Samuel down, man to man. "They're coming back," he said simply, "and they'll bring more men when they do." Samuel's jaw tightened, trying to look brave. "We could run. Take Grace somewhere safe." Josiah shook his head. "Running never solves anything. It just delays the problem. Besides, this is your home now. Our home. We stand and fight for what's ours." He pulled out an old map of the property, spreading it on the kitchen table. "Now, the house is defendable, but we need to prepare. Board up the lower windows, move furniture for cover, stock water in case they try to smoke us out." Samuel studied the map with serious eyes. "What about Grace?" Josiah's expression softened. "There's a root cellar under the kitchen. Reinforced walls, only one way in or out. If trouble comes, that's where she goes." For 3 days they prepared. Josiah taught Samuel to load and reload quickly, to stay calm under pressure. They set up positions at different windows, created backup plans. Grace knew something was wrong. Children always do, but she trusted them when they said it would be okay. On the second night, unexpected help arrived. A woman rode up alone, hands raised to show she meant no harm. Claire Sullivan was her name, and she'd been one of Rex's hired guns until she'd learned who the targets were. "I don't shoot children or the men protecting them," she'd said simply. "Thought you should know Rex is bringing 8 men tomorrow at dawn. Plans to surround the house, burn you out." She had hard eyes but an honest face, and Josiah made a decision to trust her. "Why help us?" he'd asked. Claire had looked at Grace playing with her doll on the porch. Had a little sister once. Men like Rex took her from me. Can't change the past, but maybe I can change someone else's future." They came with the first light, shadows against the rising sun. 8 riders spread in a half circle, with Rex in the center and Silas beside him, swaying drunk in his saddle even at dawn. Josiah had sent Grace to the root cellar an hour before, Claire standing guard at the entrance. Samuel was at the upstairs window with the rifle, his hand steady now, fear replaced with determination. Josiah stood on the front porch, his Colt loose in its holster, a shotgun leaning against the doorframe. "Last chance, Colt," Rex called out. "Send out the children, and everyone rides away alive." Josiah's answer was clear and simple. "They're not going anywhere with you." Rex raised his hand to signal the attack, but Claire's rifle cracked first from her position behind the water trough. One of Rex's men fell from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. Then everything exploded into chaos. Bullets shattered windows and chewed into wood as Josiah dove back inside. Samuel fired from upstairs, his aim true, dropping another rider who'd tried to flank the house. Rex's men scattered for cover, firing wild. "Burn it!" Rex screamed. "Burn them out!" 2 men ran forward with torches, but Josiah met them with the shotgun, the blast throwing one backward while Claire's rifle took the other. Smoke started rising from the barn. They'd managed to set it ablaze, but the house remained defended. Samuel had to reload, his fingers flying over the rifle like Josiah had taught him. A bullet whined past his ear, but he didn't flinch. Down below, he could hear Grace crying in the cellar, and it made him angry. She deserved better than violence and fear. They all did. Silas had stayed back during the fighting, but now he rode forward, drunk brave and screaming. "Those are my kids, my blood. You can't keep them from me." He charged toward the house, pistol raised. Josiah stepped onto the porch to meet him, everything slowing down like it always did in moments of life and death. Silas fired wild, the bullet going high. Josiah's shot was precise, hitting Silas's gun hand, sending the weapon spinning away. Silas tumbled from his horse, landing hard in the dirt, clutching his bleeding hand and wailing. The shooting stopped. Everyone watched as Josiah walked down the steps, standing over the man who'd terrorized those children. "You sold them," Josiah said quietly. "Took gold for them like they were cattle. They're not yours anymore." Rex tried to take advantage of the distraction, spurring his horse toward the house. But Claire was ready. Her shot took his hat off. The next would take his head. "It's over, Rex," she called out. "You lost. Take your brother and what's left of your men, and go." Rex looked around. 3 of his 8 guns were down, wounded or dead. Claire had switched sides. The old rancher and the boy had held them off. His eyes burned with rage, but he knew when he was beaten. "This isn't over," he snarled, but even he didn't sound convinced. They gathered their wounded, threw Silas over a horse, and rode off. As the dust settled, Samuel came running down the stairs. "We did it," he breathed, disbelief in his voice. "We actually did it." But Josiah wasn't celebrating yet. He knew men like Rex and Silas. They'd be back, maybe not tomorrow or next week, but eventually. Unless... He made a decision. "Claire, watch the children," he said, checking his guns. "Where are you going?" Samuel asked, alarmed. Josiah mounted Buttercup, his face grim. "To finish this, properly, legal-like." He rode hard for town, straight to Judge Theodore Blackwood's house. The judge, an old friend from the war, listened to the whole story. By noon, papers were drawn up, official adoption documents, making Samuel and Grace legally Josiah's children, and a restraining order against the Drummond brothers. "If they come near those children again, it's prison," the judge said. "I'll make sure the sheriff knows." 3 months after the gunfight, the Double C Ranch looked different. The barn had been rebuilt, better than before, with Samuel's help. A garden grew beside the house where Grace had planted vegetables and flowers, mixing them together because she said they were friends. Claire had stayed on as a ranch hand and protector, finding her own redemption in keeping the family safe. She'd taught Grace to braid her hair and Samuel to track deer. The house that had been empty for so long now rang with laughter and life. At the dinner table, 4 plates were set instead of 1, and every seat was filled. The ghosts of the past hadn't disappeared, but they'd made room for the living. Silas had tried to come back once, sober this time, talking about rights and blood. Josiah had met him at the gate with the legal papers. "They're my children now, mine to raise, mine to protect, mine to love. You can accept that and leave, or the sheriff can explain it to you in a cell." Faced with the reality of it, Silas had crumbled. He'd looked past Josiah to where Samuel stood on the porch, tall and strong, no longer cowering. "Do you hate me, boy?" Silas had asked. Samuel had thought for a long moment, then shook his head. "No, Pa, I pity you. You had everything and threw it away for whiskey and meanness. Josiah showed me what a real father does. He stands up. He stays. He loves even when it's hard." Silas had ridden away and never come back. Rex had disappeared entirely, some said to Mexico, running from other trouble he'd made. On Grace's 8th birthday, the whole town came to celebrate. The story had spread, how Josiah Colt had bought 2 children from a drunk and given them a home. Some called him a hero, but he didn't feel like one. He just felt like a father again. As he watched Grace blow out candles on a cake Claire had made, surrounded by children from town she'd made friends with, he thought about Margaret and Emma. They would have loved this, would have welcomed Samuel and Grace with open arms. In saving these children, he hadn't replaced the family he'd lost. He'd honored them by becoming the man they'd always believed he could be. That evening, as purple and gold painted the sky, they sat on the porch like they did most nights. Grace was teaching Claire a clapping game, while Samuel whittled a horse from soft pine. Josiah smoked his pipe, content in a way he hadn't been in years. "Josiah," Samuel said suddenly, "why did you really buy us that night? The truth." Josiah was quiet, thinking how to answer. "Because I saw myself in you, protecting Grace, and I saw my Emma in her, needing protection. But mostly because sometimes God gives you a chance to make something right in the world. You can take it or walk away. I took it." Samuel nodded, understanding. "I'm glad you did." Grace abandoned her game and climbed into Josiah's lap, something she did every evening now. "Tell us about Emma again," she said. It had become their ritual, sharing stories of the lost so they wouldn't be forgotten. As stars began to appear, Claire asked the question nobody had voiced yet. "What happens when they're grown, when they don't need you anymore?" Josiah pulled both children closer, feeling their warmth, their trust, their love. "Then I'll have done my job, but family isn't about need, it's about choice. We chose each other that night behind the saloon, and we keep choosing each other every day." Samuel reached over and took his hand, rough from work, but gentle in gesture. "We're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "This is home." Grace was already asleep, safe in the arms of the man who'd bought her freedom with gold, but earned her love with patience. The ranch was quiet except for crickets and the distant call of an owl. Looking at his unexpected family, Josiah knew the truth. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't the ones you're born with, or the ones you plan for. They're the ones you find in the darkest moments, covered in dust and pain, waiting for someone brave enough to see their worth. He'd sold his cattle and bought 2 children. It was the best trade he'd ever made. As the moon rose over the Double C Ranch, painting everything in silver light, Josiah Colt closed his eyes and said a prayer of thanks. For second chances, for children who needed saving and the strength to save them. For Claire, who'd chosen righteousness over easy money. and for the truth that family isn't about blood, it's about the promises you keep when keeping them is hard. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, and for the first time in years, Josiah Colt felt whole.